So you could essentially say that Aristotle created Hellenistic philosophy indirectly, right? Like by essentially offering that question, like what is happiness, right?
Yeah, so I would say that Hellenistic philosophy is riffing on Aristotle, right?
Yeah.
So he
Okay.
kind of, because Aristotle did a lot of things, right?
Mm.
If all we had was Aristotle's ethics, he'd still be one of the greatest philosophers of all time.
Yeah.
But he basically invented modern biology. He invented formalized logic. He has political theory. He has theory about art. He has all
Mm.
these different branches. So he did so much. But one of his main innovations was this ethical innovation where he lays it down like this. And he says, look, we're interested. This is the Nicomachean Ethics, if anyone wants to dig deeper into this. He said, everything is done for a reason, right? He's like, if you do anything, it's for a reason. It's like a 5-year-old kid. If you ask why, you'll get the next
Mm.
reason. Why do you have a job? Well, to make money. Why? Well, to buy a house. Why? Well, so I can have security for myself and my family. Why? And if you ask this question long enough to any person, everybody gets back to the same answer, which is happiness. So
Mm.
everything you do, if you ask why long enough, it gets back to, well, I think that will make me happy. I think that's what a good life is. So
Mm.
Aristotle identifies this. And so he says happiness is the ultimate ends for humans. Everything we do eventually leads back to happiness.
Yeah.
So he establishes that framework. And then he says, well, what the heck does happiness look like? This is a really important
Mm.
question, right? Because if we're all doing it to be happy, we don't want to do the wrong things. We don't want to think happiness consists of popularity, but then we realize that celebrities, they're not very happy. So if you pursue popularity, it doesn't pay off. We want to know what the content of it is.
Yeah. Now, can I just
So,
stop you there for 1 second?
oh yeah,
Can we
yeah.
define what they meant by happiness? Because a lot of people who are listening right now might have different ideas of what happiness is, but then we look at the Stoics and their word, eudaemonia, like, which has been roughly translated to like the flourishing life, right? Um,
Mhm.
now, so did Aristotle mean the same thing that we mean by happiness? What did he mean?
So it depends on what people mean by happiness, because if you haven't studied philosophy, you're getting a lot of these concepts just from television or just from
Yeah,
conversation or media, and someone
yeah,
just says, I'm happy, or this person isn't happy. So we have this kind of ambiguous concept. So it's
mm,
helpful to flesh it out. So one thing you could mean by happiness is you could mean just the sensation. So
yeah,
you could say, well, I was happy yesterday because I felt good, and I'm not happy today.
yeah,
Um, and so that's a common way of thinking about it. That's not the way that Aristotle or the Hellenistic philosophers are going to think of it. So the
mm,
term, as you pointed out, that they use is eudaimonia, and eu is a prefix which means good.
mm-hmm,
Daimon is the word we get demon from. It means like a guardian spirit. So
mm,
it's a good spirit. So in that way, you can think of it, it's like you have a good spirit watching over you.
mm-hmm,
So flourish life works, or I think of blessed life in that sense.
mm,
Um, and so what differs in this conception of happiness is happiness was something that you gauged over an entire lifetime.
mm-hmm,
So Aristotle famously says that, we can't judge if someone was happy until after they died, right?
yeah,
Because if you have a good 60 years and then the last 20 years are terrible, well, then if you looked at your life, you wouldn't say, it makes more sense if we say the term like a flourished life or a great life. We wouldn't look at that person and say, well, they had a great life.
mm,
Because, well, maybe they had a good beginning, but they had a really terrible ending.
yeah,
So it was this kind of thing you said about a totality. It was the kind of thing you said about a life overall.
mm,
It was also the kind of thing, and this is important, that because it's not a subjective feeling, it was the kind of things that other people could say about you. And you couldn't, so there's almost this way of saying, like, if you think of it as subjective, you could say, well, I know things are going terrible, but I'm happy. And if happiness is subjective, who are we to disagree? But when
mm,
happiness is it's this objective thing, people can look at you and say, no, you don't have a happy life because you don't meet these criteria, right? It's like if you think of a Stoic example, you might think of someone who's immoral, and they have a lot of money, or they have a lot of vices that they indulge in, and they say, well, screw you, Stoics. Like, I'm happy, even though I'm doing things you disagree with. And the Stoics and would want to say that we're able to say, no, you're not. Like, we're able to say that about other people based on whether or not they meet these objective criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like to think of it, I say happiness as like an introduction to the term, but I think a lot of the confusion goes away if you say a good life, you know?
Yeah.
That person had a good life. And that's what we're
Yeah.
asking the question of, what does a good life look like? And what is required for it and what is not required for it?